Israel just killed the man whose entire job was to tell the world that Iran was winning this war. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' official spokesman, General Ali Mohammed Naini, was killed in an overnight U.S.-Israeli missile strike confirmed just hours ago on March the 20th. The man paid to speak for Iran's most powerful military force is gone. Hours before the strike, Naini stood in front of cameras and said that Iran's missile industry deserves a perfect score and that production continues even under wartime conditions. He said it directly, on the record. As a rebuttal to Netanyahu's claim the day before that Iran could no longer manufacture ballistic missiles. Then Israel killed him. The man who said the missiles were still being made was dead within hours of saying it. That is not a coincidence. That is a message. And what makes this story far more significant than a single assassination is what it reveals about Israel's targeting strategy across the past 72 hours. Because this is not a random strike. This is a pattern. And once you see the pattern clearly, the direction of this war and where it is designed to end up becomes very difficult to ignore. Naini had served as the Guard Corps' official spokesman since July 2024. He was recognized inside the organization as one of its top specialists in psychological operations, soft power, and cognitive warfare. He was the public face of Operations True Promise 2, 3, and 4. The Israeli Defense Forces confirmed the strike was carried out by the Israeli Air Force and described Naini as the Guard Corps' main propagandist for the past 2 years, saying he disseminated the regime's terrorist propaganda to its proxies across the Middle East in order to influence and advance terror attacks against the State of Israel. By classifying a communications officer as a propagandist advancing terror, the Israeli military provides itself the legal and operational rationale for killing a spokesman rather than a battlefield commander. That framing is deliberate, and it matters for what comes next, because Naini was the 5th senior Iranian official killed in 4 days. And when you look at the full list, the picture it creates is not the picture of a military trying to win a war. It is the picture of something else entirely. We are going to get to what that something else is in about 60 seconds, and once you see it, the last 3 weeks of this conflict make a different kind of sense. On March the 17th, Israel killed Ali Larijani. He was the secretary of the Supreme National Security Council. He was the most powerful surviving official in the Islamic Republic after Khamenei's assassination. He had served as parliament speaker for 12 years. He had led Iran's nuclear negotiations with the West between 2005 and 2007. He had been involved in talks with the Trump administration in the weeks before this war began. Former Jordanian ambassador and president of the International Peace Institute, Zeid Ra'ad al-Hussein, said publicly after Larijani's death that he seemed to be the one person the international community could talk to, and that with him gone, it is difficult to see how anyone speaks to the Revolutionary Guard. On the same day, Israel killed Gholam Reza Soleimani, commander of the Basij paramilitary force, the man who had led the organization for 7 years and directed the crackdown on the January 2026 protests. On March the 18th, Israel killed Esmail Khatib, Iran's intelligence minister, in a targeted strike in Tehran. Khatib carried a $10 million American bounty. He was directly linked to the suppression of the Masa Amini protests in 2022 and 2023. And then on March the 20th, Naini, 5 senior officials in 4 days. But here is the detail that most coverage has missed entirely. After Khatib's death, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz issued a formal statement. He said that Netanyahu and he had authorized the military to eliminate any senior Iranian official for whom the intelligence and operational circle has been closed, without the need for additional approval. He added, "We will continue to eliminate and hunt them all." Read that carefully. That is a standing kill order with no individual authorization required for each target. Any senior official. No additional approval. Hunt them all. That statement reframes every assassination we have seen, and every one that is coming. And here is what that standing kill order reveals about the true objective of this campaign. Stay with me because this is where the story goes somewhere. The mainstream coverage has not gone. When a military targets field commanders, it is trying to win battles. When it targets logistics chains, it is trying to starve a campaign. But when it systematically eliminates intelligence ministers, security council chiefs, paramilitary commanders, nuclear negotiators, and communications officers, it is pursuing something structurally different. It is dismantling the institutional infrastructure of a state. Daniel Levy, former Israeli government advisor and former director of Middle East and North Africa policy at the European Council on Foreign Relations, told Al Jazeera this week that Israel has no real interest in smooth regime change. He said most Israeli leaders regard that as a kind of fairy tale. He said Israel is more interested in regime and state collapse. They want Iran to implode. And he argued that Israel's escalatory steps are calculated moves intended to burn off ramps and deliberately prevent the United States from backing out before that objective is achieved. That assessment came not from a critic of Israel, but from a former member of its negotiating team under two prime ministers. The Atlantic Council published a separate assessment on March the 11th, noting that state collapse in Iran, followed by chaos and civil wars spilling into neighboring countries, is of potentially far greater concern to the United States and its Arab partners than to Israel. Israel does not share a border with Iran. It does not bear the consequences of what fills the vacuum. But none of that is the biggest thing buried in this story. The biggest thing has been hiding in plain sight since the day before the bombs fell, and almost nobody has connected it directly to the assassinations you just heard about. On February the 26th, 2026, negotiators from the United States and Iran concluded a third round of indirect talks in Geneva. The American delegation included Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, and Central Command Commander Admiral Brad Cooper, who attended in dress uniform. The presence of the top United States military commander in the Middle East at a negotiating table was itself a signal that Washington was treating the talks as serious. The aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln and its strike group were already positioned off the Iranian coast. Diplomacy and military positioning were running simultaneously. The following day, February the 27th, Oman's Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi appeared on CBS News' Face the Nation, one of the most watched political programs in the United States, and announced a breakthrough that he said has never been achieved any time before. Iran had agreed to zero accumulation and zero stockpiling of enriched uranium. Iran had accepted full verification by the International Atomic Energy Agency, including access by United States inspectors. Existing stockpiles would be irreversibly converted. Al-Busaidi said the broad political components of a deal could be agreed the following day. Technical talks in Vienna were scheduled for the following week. Implementation could be completed within 90 days. He said a peace deal is within our reach if we just allow diplomacy the space it needs to get there. He also said, on the same broadcast, I do not think any alternative to diplomacy is going to solve this problem. That was the mediator's explicit warning against the exact course of action that was taken the next morning. Vice President J.D. Vance met with al-Busaidi that same day. The strikes began the next morning, February the 28th. One day after the mediator announced on American national television that the nuclear issue, the stated justification for this war, had been effectively resolved. After the bombs fell, al-Busaidi said he was dismayed. He said active and serious negotiations had been completely undermined. The Vienna talks never happened. And Ali Larijani, the man who had been Iran's lead nuclear negotiator for years and who had been in contact with the Trump administration before the war, was killed 3 weeks later. The person with the standing and the institutional knowledge to pick up those talks from the Iranian side is gone, as is the intelligence minister, as is the Security Council chief, as is the Basij commander, as is the spokesman. The entire layer of officials who would need to be involved in negotiating an end to this war has been systematically removed. Now here is the part with no clean resolution, and it is important to say that clearly. 3 possibilities account for the timing of the February 28th strikes. The United States and Israel genuinely did not know about the Oman agreement. That is technically possible, but extremely difficult to believe. Al-Busaidi announced it on Face the Nation. Vance met him the same day. For the governments running the military operation to have missed a public announcement on American national television the morning before they launched strains, credibility passed its breaking point. The second possibility is that they knew and launched anyway because the objective was never limited to the nuclear issue. There is a fact that supports this directly. Israeli Defense Minister Katz disclosed on March the 4th that Israel had originally planned to strike Iran in mid-2026. That means the operational timeline for this war predated the February negotiations entirely. The talks were happening while the strike plans were already built. If the military calendar was set before the diplomacy concluded, then the diplomacy was never going to stop the calendar. The third possibility is that they knew, judged Iran would not honor the terms, and acted preemptively regardless. Each of those conclusions carries a different moral and legal weight, and none of them are comfortable. Joe Kent, the Trump-appointed director of the National Counterterrorism Center, resigned on March the 17th over the war. His statement said he could not in good conscience support the ongoing conflict and that Iran posed no imminent threat to the United States. Trump called him very weak on security. That resignation came from inside the administration's own counterterrorism apparatus. It was followed by the accusation that Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard altered her Senate testimony to remove intelligence details that contradicted the imminent threat justification. The legal foundation for this entire campaign rests on the assertion of imminent danger. If the intelligence was shaped to support a conclusion already reached, and if the Oman agreement was available and bypassed, then the question of whether this war had to happen is not a fringe argument. It is the central question. The people who could answer it definitively are not talking. The mediator is dismayed, the negotiator is dead, the intelligence assessment has been partially redacted, and the standing kill order means more names will follow. Whether the Islamic Republic's command structure is still functioning as a coordinated system, or whether the systematic removal of its senior leadership has fragmented decision-making in ways not yet visible from the outside, no external analyst can say with certainty. The Guard Corps released a statement today saying their soft power will continue to grow despite the assassination of its chief strategist. That is either institutional defiance or institutional desperation. We do not know which. What we do know is the cost of answering that question through military force rather than through the agreement that was on the table. Oil at $115 a barrel. Qatar's Ras Laffan liquefied natural gas complex, the largest on Earth, damaged by Iranian retaliatory strikes with some facilities potentially offline for up to 5 years. 17% of global liquefied natural gas capacity disrupted. The Strait of Hormuz effectively closed. 20,000 seafarers stranded. The Iranian Red Crescent reporting more than 18,000 civilians injured and 204 children killed. 3 million Iranians displaced. Over 1,000 dead in Lebanon. 13 United States service members killed. And the Pentagon asking Congress for $200 billion in additional war funding. That is the price of the path that was chosen over the agreement that was reached in Geneva and announced on Face the Nation one day before the bombs fell. The one person the international community could talk to is dead. The talks that might have ended this before it started were abandoned one day after they succeeded. And the man who spent his final hours insisting Iran's missiles were still being made was killed before the day was out. Did Washington know about the Oman agreement before the bombs fell on February the 28th? If they did, what does that tell you about why this war is actually being fought? Drop your answer in the comments. This is the conversation that is not happening anywhere else. This is Global Conflicts Dispatch. Subscribe. Back tomorrow.